Hi, thank you for watching Digging to China. I'm Dong Shong. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much. The Chinese Communist Party is telling its elite to sell off their overseas assets in light of the sanctions imposed on Russia's elites following the invasion of Ukraine. According to Wall Street Journal's report, the order was issued in March, and it calls on top-level regime officials, their spouses, and their children to share the real estate and shares in entities held overseas. The journal reported that the directive is part of Chinese President Xi Jinping's effort to protect party officials from the same types of sanctions to which Russian elites have been exposed. The United States and European countries have seized and frozen billions of dollars in Russian elites' assets, including real estate, boats, and helicopters. Insulating Chinese officials from sanctions would protect the regime from blowback should it invade Taiwan. In July last year, Xi called for complete reunification with Taiwan and said Communist China would smash efforts in support of Taiwanese independence. The ban could play a role in Chinese leader Xi Jinping's effort to increase his influence at a twice-a-decade leadership shuffle scheduled for later this year. The directive prohibits spouses and children of ministerial-level officials from holding directly or indirectly any real estate abroad or shares in entities registered overseas, the people said. Senior officials and members of their immediate families would also be barred from setting up accounts with overseas financial institutions unless they have legitimate reasons for doing so, such as study or work. It is not clear if the rules apply retroactively, but the family members of some senior officials have sold shares in overseas companies in order to comply, the people said. It isn't known if the directive will be made public. The directive came as Mr. Xi seeks to minimize the geopolitical risks for the CCP because the leadership concerns that officials with overseas financial exposure could become a liability if the US and other Western powers impose sanctions against Chinese leaders and their relatives, similar to what was done against Moscow following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In January, Mr. Xi said, leading cadres, especially senior cadres, must pay attention to family discipline and ethics, lead by example in managing their spouses and children properly, being a dutiful person and doing things in a clean way, he said. Officials must sign pledges declaring compliance with the new rules. This requirement would give Mr. Xi more leverage over the political elite ahead of the party's 20th National Congress. Mr. Xi is expected to secure a third five-year term as party chief at the Congress while packing his leadership bench with more trusted associates. The compliance pledges would give Mr. Xi leverage over any official found violating the overseas assets rule, as the offending cadre would become liable for serious offenses like disloyalty and dishonesty to the party. Since taking power in 2012, Mr. Xi has waged a high-profile campaign to fight corruption and curb displays of extravagance among officials, saying that the party faces an existential battle against moral decay within its ranks. In 2014, the party said it discovered some 3,200 naked officials. The term naked officials referred to those who sent spouses and children abroad and stashed financial assets overseas, and they themselves appear having not much asset in China. What happened to these naked officials? A third of them were demoted because their families refused to return to China. Beijing has also gone after offshore assets linked to economic fugitives as part of its Fox Hunt and Skynet campaigns against alleged white-collar criminals and corrupt officials. Over the years, some scholars advocated a so-called sunshine law, which would require officials to publicly declare their personal assets. The party introduced rules in 1995 that required leading cadres to report their income and has since added regulations asking officials to disclose more personal and financial information, including details of their spouses and children's employment, as well as real estate and investment holdings. But the financial disclosure are only for the eyes of internal monitors, still fall short of sunshine law many advocated. In early 2010, public debate over wealth disclosure requirements for officials evolved into a series of protests by activists demanding greater transparency into the family assets of senior officials. Authorities later arrested many members of the campaign. China's mounting tensions with the West have fueled concerns that any financial exposure that senior Chinese officials have overseas could be used as leverage against Beijing, particularly after seeing how the US and the European governments unleashed far-reaching sanctions against Russian officials. In 2016, the Panama Papers revealed the names of members of elite party families identified as directors or shareholders of offshore companies, including a brother-in-law of Mr. Xi, as well as relatives of Mao Zedong and a former Vice President Zheng Qinghong. The report didn't accuse any individual or organization of wrongdoing. In April, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman said she hoped Beijing takes the right lessons out of the Russian-Ukraine crisis, suggesting that the West would impose heavy sanctions on China should it use military force against Taiwan. In February, when introducing the Protecting Higher Education from the Chinese Communist Party Act, U.S. Congress Representative Vicky Hartzler revealed that Chinese President Xi Jinping's only daughter, Xi Mingze, is living in America. There is only a few basic biographical details known about China's first daughter. Xi Mingze, born on June 27, 1992, studied French at her high school, Hangzhou Foreign Languages School. She traveled to the U.S. in 2010 to study at Harvard University under a pseudonym. But it wasn't until 2012 that many people had even heard of her. In April last year, a Chinese man, Niu Tengyu, a website technician, was charged with leaking the personal information of President Xi Jinping's daughter and was sentenced to 14 years in prison. A total of 24 people were arrested in 2019 because of the leak. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly.